Say what's up, Headspaces, Viwe, the brother from the ancient mother. Once again, we back with another Headspace album review. Now I want to start this off by saying art is the telling of a story through various mediums. This is one story, the collective human story, which becomes many stories in one, because everybody has shades of experiences that are particular to their own context, but it is these contexts that allow us to find our collective unified sense of oneness as people. That's the power in art. Now, how art is produced and how art is given is something that is now funneled through industrial means. And what industry tries to do is to not so much give an experience, but to give a product. And the difference between the two is that an experience seeks to give the viewer or the listener an experience that is going to be able to embody a part of their lives for as long as they will find value in it. What the product attempts to do is right in its inception. It's marked with a date. It's marked with an expiry code inherent in the way that it's been done. So products are things which are made to die, whereas experiences are things which are created to live on. And it's important for us to understand as artists, in this balance of creating experiences in the context of capitalism, is it possible for the stories we bring across through the music, particularly in rap, to last as eternal experiences for all audiences to be able to resonate with practically for the end of time itself? Now, this is what I believe is the core of the politics of music, particularly in this context of the headspace rap. I want to talk about Nasty C as a case study for how many an artist, many a rapper, many an MC is pulled into this place where they subject the value of their story simply to become just another product. In other words, they sacrifice the eternal quality of their artistic integrity. The story that they have to tell is burnt in the furnace of trend, populism, and currency. This is something artists do because they believe that it is the only way to navigate and operate in the capitalistic world. Because if you're going to try and somehow unshackle yourself from the bearings of what is deemed popular, then you're shackling yourself from money, you're shackling yourself from success at the highest level. Now, the story of Nasty C, this young kid from Durban who emanates literally out of nowhere and captures South Africa's attention. Why? He captures South Africa's attention because he possesses a quality that rappers before him have strived to do. This thing of being able to easily cross over into the global market is something that Nasty is seemingly just blessed with. And he has the ability to be able to switch his accent, reference codes, and be able to move and give us slick trap raps that are basically identical to the era in which he is influenced by. Now, a lot of rappers were salivating around Nasty C as a product to be able to export. He became SA's prodigy rap hero in the blink of a juice back. And it's this moment which characterized many of what South African hip-hop is in today. This need to relate to the rest of the world at the expense of artistic integrity. Now, if you've been following these reviews, you know that there's something we call the A word, authenticity, which is simply about understanding how your particular locale and culture determines what I like to call the artistic palette. What is the artistic palette? Context is something that determines the environment an artist comes from. And it is that environment with all of its influences, the television, the fashion, the culture, the syndicated influences, the indigenous influences, all come and they mold up to become a range of textures, hues, and colors that are part of this artist's particular space and universe. So when an artist gives us their story, there are unique things about how they grew up, where they grew up, what era they grew up in, what they are feeding from, what they're inspired by, and how that ultimately determines the way they produce their art. Nasty C is no different. He's basically a 2000 who becomes the leader of this new voice that is diving deep in the culture of syndicated knowledge and wisdom, pseudo-American, and basically seeing themselves through the lens of the global world, which means not much bearing an indigenous culture. Now, that's a whole political discussion in and of itself of how the youth of today find themselves in this place where they're hovering above an American taste and not so much grounded and rooted in their own particular locale, and how that just plays into the grander capitalist scheme for Western culture to become the ultimate tastemakers of the world. So even when you do give your culture, it's twisted back and sold to you in an Americanized or Westernized format. And this is something that an artist is keenly aware of, because artists protect their story. As I said in the beginning, the art is about the story, and the story is eternal, because the story relates to these archetypes and qualities that will never be old. The product is temporary, because the product has to tell these stories in the way that is particular to the format that is current and popular. And if you're an artist that's playing into mainstream pop culture, this is what you do to yourself. So from the beginning of Price City into projects like String and Bling and Bad Hair, Nasty C, just by virtue of his age, is growing and being accustomed to understanding two things. What does it mean to be a South African in his era? What does it mean to be influenced by this American culture and still somehow have to ground yourself in where you come from? What does it mean to be accepted by the world and find yourself alienated from your own culture? Does that even matter? Do the graces of your indigenous landscape matter? Or can we simply destine ourselves to wherever the context of Western power and the imperial dominating force leads us? Now, he brings us the Ivyson Army Mixtape. He's the general of a new generation of MCs who have come and made their mark. We're talking about people like MT, whose collaborative relationship with Nasty goes way back to the days of his own popularity and stardom. We're talking about MCs like Blackie, who have come into the fore, really being the modern day renditions of what's going on in the States right now. So Nasty C, pretty much in the middle of all of that, right in the cusp of when trap blew, and still relevant in a moment where trap is still pretty much festering and expanding its reach in different forms, where it went from being very Future-esque and Young Thug based to now being very Little Baby and Da Baby and all of the other babies in the era. Now, if we're playing into what Nasty C is all about, he, in many of his experiences and interviews, has given us the idea of an artist who is not interested in their story anymore. Tell me something about Nasty C beyond Price City that tells us who he is. Because back then he was establishing himself, and even the whole concept of Ivyson is from the fact that his late mother, Ivy, is a strong factor of his career and how he's built up. But the moment the fame took hold and he basically expanded and became a superstar in his own right, Nasty C's artistic direction wasn't so much about narrative than it was about thematics. It's about playing into the themes that are popular today. Branding, corporate interest, investment in being an aesthetic and some kind of tool of youth influence. Whether it's the deals he has with the different liquor brands, the fashion brands, Nasty C is positioning himself exclusively as an objectified body for brands to attach themselves to. And this becomes void of an authentic human experience, because now it seems as if Nasty C's only interest is selling us shit. Selling us a lifestyle, selling us an aspirational quality and a dream that's always been the capitalist agenda. Drink this, wear this, because I, Nasty C, the leader of the new school, the general of the Ivyson Army, am some kind of archetype for how young people can break into the world. Is this true? Now I really want to go into what the Ivyson Army Tape is. The Ivyson Army Tape is two things. It's Nasty C reminding us that he's still the most dominant trap rapper that has ever been present in the South African sphere. And number two, it's him expanding his commercial reach using South Africa's latest talent, thereby giving us pretty much a very overt statement. He is the general of the new school. Does he do it? Let's go into it. Now, sonically, the Ivyson Army Mixtape is Nasty continuing his tradition of being a historicist. Now, if you've listened and watched earlier reviews, you'll know that I categorize artists either as historicists or futurists. Artists who play into what is possible, futurist, or artists who stick to what has already been established, historicist. You are not wrong for being a historicist, nor for being a futurist. It's all about understanding how that ties into the way you tell your story. Again, this is about bringing art which isn't simply a product. Because if your art is trapped in trend and has no sense of its own artistic palette, if you take away your unique context and do not feed from those things that make you you, and you are redirected to basically mimicking what's out there in the name of influence and in the name of relevance, what happens is, if you're as talented as Nasty C in the way that you mimic the production value, it'll linger on. And in a country like South Africa, it might even be successful. Is successful in the case of Nasty, because this ties into something that is very core to the style and the argument of how I review these projects. Hip-hop is something we saw from a window of the American experience. And because of that, many of our ideas of what is ideal in terms of rap and in terms of hip-hop still play into the closer you are in proximity to Americanism / whiteness / Western qualities, the greater you are. We have this colonial subjected thinking. And when I say we, I say the majority of hip-hop heads. It's in the way that we judge and we qualify the dopest MC. If his accent is close to America, then there's something we are somehow led to believe is superior. If what they bring really mimics what's going on in the world globally right now to a T, then we revere them for being able to blend in a global world. Because South Africa, in its post-apartheid legacy, is a country that never worked on building self-esteem in its own unique indigenous creative quality. This creates a colonial mindset in the way that we assess ourselves and our art. And I argue that our hip-hop, that our rap music is trapped in this colonial framework, where just because somebody plays into this ideal rapper who's still this dreamy image of the first American rapper we might have heard, then that makes them dope. Nasty C has definitely been somebody riding on the coattails of this colonialist benefit. And I think time for that is very limited, because people are beginning to realize the importance and the value of knowledge of self, the importance in our own indigenous power and quality. People are beginning to understand the importance of being who they are. And in that era, projects like these cannot stand the test of time. Shit, they can't even stand 5 seconds. Because if we're truly being honest, everything that Nasty C has done, from that hair, 2 strings of blings, is one long extended commercial. 1, for his own personal interest, and 2, for this portal into Western influence and power. So projects like these continue to reiterate something that's already been done there. And here's where Nasty C slips into doom. We might have the quality of revering what is seen as the height of Western excellence, but when you actually go to the West, you're a small fish in a very large power dynamic. And this is what has happened to Nasty C. Even openly talking to his fans and looking for artists and literally showing us the desperate place he's in right now of being a South African who's being marketed in an African way, but truly has a syndicated and exported an international heart, and whose sense of his own Zulu power is virtually non-existent, whose sense of his own African uniqueness doesn't live in and around his artistic imagination. This project basically emphasizes Nasty as the general of the new age. It reminds us that in South Africa he calls the shot, because he is literally the forebearer to a generation of artists who feel that looking beyond the borders of their own country is the artistic decision to make, and in the end sacrifice the uniqueness of our own authenticity to be able to fit into the international market. Has this really ever worked? No. Give me one example of an artist who's watered down their unique authenticity in order to fit into a global capital and succeeded. Because every artist that has dominated the American market, who is not from America, has done so by tapping into their own unique local qualities. Whether we're talking about a Wizkid or a Burna Boy, whose Afro beats was able to take the unique influences that they draw from hip-hop and R&B and soul and redirect itself back to the Afro beat of Fela, to these rhythmic drums that are uniquely Nigerian and African. Even a Drake, who's really Canadian, and whose influences of being able to be drawn from these island immigrants who come from this side, from Canada's French connection, from all this vast mix of culture that comes from Canada, was able to produce an artist who had pockets of creativity and approaches to rap that Americans had not even caught up to yet. So if Drake, being the leader of this new school, is anything to go by, it doesn't work to subject your own unique authenticity to the global landscape. I'm talking to Nasty C directly, and I'm saying, what have you actually gained by being a pseudo-American in America? It's time to come back home. It's time to truly understand that you can never be a Zulu man with power if you don't understand where that power comes from. It's time to understand that back when you told us the stories of Price City, and you told us about this juice that had been returned to you, it was something that had to do with this unique South African environment. And I'm here to say that all of these projects are going to become a shovel that's going to dig Nasty C's international aspiring grave to the ground 6 feet. He's going to be an artist we remember for being a great mimic, for being the opportunity that we lost, but for also being a lesson of how we lost that opportunity. That it is only in believing in ourselves and what we can do that the world will be able to respect us. So if Nasty C wants to be a general in any army, let alone an army dedicated to the memory of his mother, he has to understand what people like his mother were inspired by. He has to understand the collective South African imagination. In order for his artistic palette to be more than just a product, but resonate to become a story that will touch every person, we've got to know who this young Ngobo boy from Durban truly is. Behind the accent, behind the brands, behind the shiny trinkets that we're constantly being told to buy and feed into, behind just being a body for capitalism to take advantage of. It's time for Nasty C to show us that he has an electrifying talent, which he does, but his lyricism, his knack, his wit, and his ability to be able to relate to the global world is simply succumbing to an unconsidered and unfiltered sense of internationalism. And this is what is bringing about the denies of Nasty C. So if this Ivyson Army is what we have, then we're truly losing the war. Because if artists like Blackie and MT and Crowned Young and Casper Nyovest and everybody who is in this project, which simply is just another 808 trap, dark with a little bit of those colorful hues of blues and gray, then what are we doing? The Ivyson Army tape is another step in Nasty's demise. Nasty C is in a place where I feel is something I'd like to term artistic purgatory. If you're as familiar with the Roman Catholic idea of limbo, where before you go to heaven or hell, there's this middle place where your soul is decided based on the quality of the life that you've lived. So if an artist truly is to reach the heights or is to return back to a dark death, there's a moment in the middle there where their soul is decided by the fans, by the winds of change, by time and by space. Nasty C is in this limbo space. And if he understands that in order for him to get his juice back, he's got to come back home, he might make it into artistic heaven. I've seen glimpses of this. His verse in Lemonade, where for the first time ever, he references things from the South African imagination. I never thought I'd hear Nasty C and Movite in the same scope of thinking. Maybe that's the influence of AKA, but this is not the episode for that. All I'm saying is there's so much potential for Nasty to emerge from this limbo and resurrect himself into the South African rapper we all know he can be. Or is he going to continue to play to the strengths of people who do not know where he comes from? Because if he does, then I'm sorry, but this is the death of Nasty C. I'm giving this project a 3 out of 10. Simply because what it does is that it keeps us in this place where the art is simply a reproduction of what's being done by other people. And I cannot give quality merit to mimicry, which has persisted pretty much long enough. It was cute and bad hair and strings and bling. It was tolerable with Zulu Man with some power, even though it was really problematic in many aspects because he's using African themes to basically sell ourselves back to ourselves. But now I think it's reached a point where it isn't admirable beyond an audience who are not aware of the dynamics that are taking place. I'm VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. This has been a hell of a review. I try to squeeze in a lot of what the value to the art is, and ultimately how the art plays itself out in the present moment and in the future. These songs are not going to live beyond this year or probably even the year after that. Maybe that's not even the point. Maybe these are just little trinkets for his tour. Shout out to Nasty C for supporting younger artists who are doing their thing. But if we're going to truly tell a story and invent traditions that determine the history of hip-hop, globally speaking, we're going to have to understand why we're special as Africans doing hip-hop. Shout out to you.